to have you here. So I'm Amanda Bickerstaff. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AI for Education. We're an organization that's fully committed to bringing responsible AI adoption to schools and districts. We do both AI literacy work and also guidance development. And what I'm really excited to have you all here as part of our webinar with Carnegie Learning about this idea from hype to help. Like, how are we actually going to start to really navigate through what potentially is overhyped in generative AI in education? But also, I'm joined with Jimmy Brem he is an SVP of Academic Partnerships at Carnegie Learning. So thank you, Jimmy, for being here.
Thank
Give
you,
you a
Amanda.
second to introduce yourself. Where are you today, Jimmy?
I got home this morning. I was in Kansas City to start the week, but I got home about 11 o'clock this morning. And so happy to be back inside of Kentucky, in central Kentucky, and joining everyone across the country today. So great to see you, Amanda. Appreciate the chance to join you all. I'm the SVP of Partnership for Carnegie. I get to work across the country with district leaders and school leaders on putting all of the needs of students and teachers actually into play to get that needle moved on student achievement. So super happy to be here. Always happy to join you. And really super excited we have a district partner with us as well today.
Absolutely. And so I also want to introduce Shara Dickerson. We have met a couple of times through the interwebs, and I was really impressed by the thoughtfulness of the approach at El Paso Independent School District. So Shara, well, she's in Texas, spoiler alert, but would love you to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Well, good afternoon from El Paso, Texas. Texas is such a large state. So my little city, little hub is located at the far west area of Texas. Believe it or not, I'm closer to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and it takes only 45 minutes to drive over there. While going to Dallas, I saw somebody from Dallas here, and that's about like what, 10-hour drive. So just
Wow,
imagine the difference. Isn't that crazy?
that's
Yeah,
great.
Texas is big, everybody. Just in case you didn't know, Texas is quite big. But what we're really excited to bring you today is a discussion about AI in education. But I want to start with just some norms. And so first of all, thank you all for already saying hello in the chat. We are not just a national group, we're international as well. But also, we love it for you all to engage. You are a community of practice, whether you can see each other or not. You are a community of practice. If you have great ideas, resources, suggestions, please drop those into the chat. If you have a specific question for one of us, we're going to do the Q&A. So if you can go over to the Q&A, that's where you're going to put specific questions that we'll be able to then field at the end of the webinar. As always, be respectful. We're all learning together. I have to say we do webinars every week, and we have never had an example of someone not being respectful because of the importance of the topic, but just always keep that in mind. And then remember, the questions for each other, the resources should go in the chat, but for us, it should go in the Q&A. And so I'm going to hand it over to, like we just talked about the presenters, but I'm going to hand it over to Jimmy to talk a little bit about our partnership with AI for Education and Carnegie Learning, but also a little bit more about the survey that brings us all together today. So over to you, Jimmy.
Yeah, Amanda, thank you. Again, I am the SVP for Carnegie Learning. So we are a K-12 education company who uses, for the last 25 plus years, actually been utilizing AI to make sure that we're supporting students and teachers with the ultimate goal of making sure the research is there for moving student achievement. We are really excited to partner with Amanda and her team at AI for Education out of the necessity that we heard from our district partners across the country that we really need support on putting the power of AI into place in a responsible way that really and truly does that same calling, which is to make the achievement difference for students. And so we found Amanda and we began that partnership with AI for Education because we found her and her organization to be truly the leader in supporting students and teachers. And you will see her network and her network of people. A lot of you have probably seen Amanda speak or seen her team speak and know just how powerful she is in supporting students. And most importantly, I think what we share with AI for Education is a true love for students and a true love for helping teachers. So that's where we partner together, and that's what we're here to do today. What we did, and we've done this annually now, is we've sent out a survey to teachers from across the country to really start to just gain the perspective of educators. Where are we in terms of what has been over the last 3 years really groundbreaking in terms of the use of AI and specifically the use of Gen AI across all populations, all walks of life? So the survey this year was sent out in 656 total respondents in 49 states and Puerto Rico representation as well. Just a quick 10 minutes was sent out over that last as people started to bridge into Christmas break and then throughout January. You can see there on the right, the percentage of respondents that we received back, primarily teachers, which is great. That's who we want to really work to support, but then also at building and district administrators as well. Happy with the responses, and we have sent out to you already. If you registered for the webinar and are here now, you already have received a copy of that survey. We are definitely not just going to go through the survey questions today. We're going to go through a few that were kind of interesting to us and have really strong panels of discussion about what we took from it and what we see happening out in the field. That's our goal. But you do have access to that survey. If you have colleagues after today that you want to share that with, have them log on. We're happy to get them access to the survey as well.
Absolutely. And Andy, just so you know, that just went to us. So Andy's going to drop the link into the channel just in case you don't have the research handy. But what we're going to do is we're going to ask you all a poll right now too. And so one of the things that we always like to do is, first of all, what you'll notice is that this is not written, what are you most scared of? But we want to know what you, like how optimistic you are about AI in education. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a poll and share it with everybody. And this is just a really good way to like start to have like, let's see who's in the room with us. Like right now, I am in a school district in New Jersey where, we worked with 2 different districts, 60 people, students to teachers. But I can tell you every single room I'm in or our team is in has the same variance of not very optimistic to very optimistic to somewhere in the middle of somewhere of like not sure, uncertain. Like, it's always quite interesting to see that. And so what we're going to do is hopefully, I think Annie and or Amy are going to create this poll. We're going to keep moving though. There we go. So please make sure you answer. I'm going to ask Sharo and Jimmy to answer as well. I am I can't. Oh, we can't do it. So just think about your answer. I know mine is. It's in your head.
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone's going to do that. We're going to give everyone a little bit of time, but we're going to move forward a little bit in terms of where we saw what we saw in the research. And so I think this is really interesting because this is the thing, everybody. We are all learning together, and you are going to have this variance. And this is where I love that this research really brings us about, is that you're going to have everything from extremely optimistic to extremely pessimistic. Although I will say that from this, it actually seems like the majority of us are really living in this somewhere in between. Like the vast majority of us are just not sure. We're either using that in a way, in a very pragmatic way, we're using it sometimes and not other times, or we're watching what's happening around us before we make a decision of our use. So it means like, maybe we've been to a professional development or a webinar. Maybe we've tried ChatGPT, but we're not going all the way in. And so I think that this is really where we live. We also have on the other side, and I would say this is probably slightly overrepresented because it's people answering a survey about AI. And so usually what you're going to find is a little bit more positive because of the demographics themselves, where you're going to see both AI enthusiasts. These are the get on the bus or get run over people that are like, everyone should understand that AI literacy and AI is not going away. Also, those that are kind of in between, where like, we really think this is positive, but we're still kind of not very sure about when to get started, but we think it could be good. I will say that those extremely pessimistic, again, I think that what we're seeing here is a little overrepresentation about who is doing it. But I have a question for the panel. And so this is a question that we ask everyone we hire, by the way. We ask on a scale of 1 to 10. How optimistic are you about AI? So I'm going to start with Sharo. So give me your answer, but then also tell me why. So I'm going to come off share and we're going to have a conversation.
So for me, knowing that I work in a public school district with 50,000 students and close to 8,000 employees, I would say that AI would be at the level 6 or 7. And I know we've talked about this. So around that level, because I know AI is still growing. There's still a lot of changes that can happen. I still see AI, even though it is growing rapidly, we're still in the toddler stages. So there's still a lot of aspects, I think, in the realm of education that still has a lot of gaps and also some room for growth. And I think that's good because it will allow educators like myself, right? It doesn't matter what title you have, but as an educator or even as a parent, you can share your perspective and also what you think would be beneficial and what we need to be aware of when we get more into AI use in education.
It's great. And, I think that you have a really unique perspective as a district that's actually a pretty complex district, right? Lots of demographic differences, lots of different needs, both from your students, community, but also your teachers. So I love that you're really taking that balanced approach. So, Jimmy, who I'm going to guess is slightly more optimistic, what do you think?
So Amanda, I will say, like full transparency, when we first started partnering together, I was a solid 4 here, right? I would probably be in that like skeptical adopter. Like I 100% realize like there are certain tasks that I can do so much more quickly by utilizing AI. I need to use it. I need to, busy lives, we all have busy lives, and if something can make me more efficient, I wanted to do it. But it was definitely when it came to education, really, really concerned with it. And so I was a solid 4 for a very long time. I will say, really just over the last 3 or 4 months, and I will kind of ask a question back to you because I'd love your thoughts on that change. It's changed so rapidly, and it does change so rapidly. My initial concerns were always when we're using artificial intelligence with students or anything replacing in front of students, like that level of accuracy that we have to ensure is when working with a young brain who the first time you learn something, we know how that cements into the mind and how hard it is to unlearn. And a lot of my skepticism was if this is a 12-year-old learning a topic for the first time, I'm really, really nervous that if it tells them wrong, we're we can't do that in education, right? We've got to do everything we can to make sure they're getting accurate information. So that was a lot of my skepticism. So I would say I'm 5 to 6 now, just as I've seen like the accuracy start to improve, as well as, and like a shout out to everybody on today. I think as educators, we're beginning to really use those practices, those networks together to realize how we can use it responsibly, though we definitely certainly have room to continue work to do that. So I'm like right now I'm in that like pragmatic user for sure. I'm not an enthusiast yet. I'm still in that pragmatic user stage.
Okay, so for us, we are actually probably an 8 on some things and a 0 on others. In fact, I was talking to a group today that are elementary, and when I said we do not support AI chatbot use for under 13, I think they went, oh no, like there are a lot of tools that are already being used. But I think that what we see is that this is all about AI literacy. So there are people in the chat that have already like that no matter what happens, we need to start building AI literacy to be able to move to more of an optimistic space. And I do think that there's research that already shows that if you have more AI literacy, not only do you use the tools more judiciously and less, but you use them better. Because what you don't think is it's magic, or you don't think it's always right, or that it's always the best tool. There are other tools, including our minds, or our friends and collaborators, whatever it may be, a pen and paper that actually work best. And so I think that this is where we get really excited. I think that balancing, like we just talked about, and I think this is the most important thing, is that we have to balance what we're doing right now to understand that these tools are not going away. In fact, AI literacy is the #1 rising skill on LinkedIn today. And so means that if you are teaching high school students, or you are going to have students that are going to be expected to, in their internship, not even when they graduate, their internship, to have ChatGPT, prompt engineering, or AI literacy. And so I think that while we have to be incredibly intentional around bias, around appropriateness, developmentally appropriateness, we can't ignore it. And we have to start to understand that just by learning about it, do we become users that are going to be safer? And I think that's really important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Annie or Amy to actually show where we are as a group. So if we can share the poll results right now to see how you compare to Sharo, Jimmy, and I, that would be great. So let's see if this works. I hope so. Oh, there we go. We did it. Okay, so what we have here is extremely optimistic. Look at us, group. You guys are like, yeah. So the majority of us, I guess you're also spending your time on an AI webinar. So 80% of us are going to be in the optimistic. We have a 10% neutral. You know what? I think it's great. Those 4 people that are extremely pessimistic, you guys are kind of my people sometimes. We actually love talking to you because there's a real opportunity to learn why and to have these discussions. But I do think it's really interesting. And this is why I think it's so good to to ask these questions because, like I said, every room, even a webinar where you're spending your time, there will be a high variance of from very optimistic to very pessimistic. So thank you for being honest and sharing. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep moving through the results. And I think that this is where I think that there are a lot of opportunities to talk about the more optimistic section of our discussion, which is already what we see as the top three uses of generative AI in education by teachers are going to be around creating teaching materials. So, I think that there are opportunities here. And I would say that we think about that a lot. What we see is like differentiation, taking existing materials and adapting them for different audiences, adding extensions, adapting, getting feedback as well. The second is around brainstorming and generating ideas. This is our favorite, everybody. We actually do a think aloud where we show you how to take a traditional rubric and then like blow it up, make it funny, make it like appropriate for multiple audiences, anticipate student needs. So we love brainstorming and generating ideas. I will say AI is not always right, but it usually is very creative because that's how it's been designed. Specifically, generative AI has been designed to be creative. And the last thing is around written communication. I will say probably some of you have gotten a ChatGPT worded email that you're kind of hoping that didn't happen. But I do think that some people are using this in really meaningful ways to more consistently actually reach out and connect with community members. And so I want to kind of get the experience. So I want to start with Sharo again, knowing what you know about how you and your community as a district leader, but then how you think that your teachers are using the tools as well.
So when we first started, well, me and my team pretty much, when we first heard about AI, we were already kind of, having, again, these conversations and brainstorming. How are we going to introduce this in the, so that teachers will understand? And they know very well that students have all the time to explore different technological tools. They just have the time and they collaborate. And that's when you see a lot of teamwork happening among students, right? They share resources, they find out the pros and cons of it and how it will benefit them individually. I think what has been helpful with us is that as a team, since it's new for us, we learned it together. And so I think that would be very helpful is that when, working at a campus or working in the classroom, is that you have your groups, you have your little niches, you have your people, PLCs, where you can together, right? Explore an AI tool, no matter what AI tool that may be. And eventually you start off with your personal use of the tool. And then eventually you're going to start thinking, how can this help me, knowing that I'm a teacher? I used to teach middle school mathematics. So I put myself in that place. How am I going to use AI to help me with the work that I do as an educator? So looking at differentiation would be one, because oftentimes, as teachers, especially if you're like me, a veteran who've been in education for almost 30 years, you often gravitate towards to what is comfortable and what you know already that is tried and true. So it's very hard to move one's cheese when if it works, why fix, if it's not broken, why fix it? And if it still works, why change it, right? But then as a lifelong learner, we have to challenge ourselves. Is there other ways to differentiate to make it more meaningful for students, knowing, and if you look at data, your own data for your classroom or for your campus, where are the students at? It's a different generation of students. What are the different technological exposures they have each and every day? And how are they being brought up in today's society? So you all have to consider those factors and then ask, well, then how can my teaching, how can my lesson be more effective and be more meaningful? And you're absolutely right, Amanda. If we are truly preparing our students, right? Then I think it's important that we need to be open, even though we're afraid at certain things. We need to explore and find out how this can benefit our kids.
Yeah. And so I think that, Sharo, I love the way that you're thinking about incremental progress, because I think what you're not saying is we're giving everyone ChatGPT 4 access and you're going to town, you're changing everything. And so there's some concern in the chat about people like and there are tools out there. I'll be honest, everybody, there are tools out there that are kind of like teachers pay teachers. So not high quality instructional materials that are now generative AI that you plug in something, you say, build me this thing. And that's not what we're suggesting. And what you're going to find with Sharo, Jimmy, and myself, we're actually thinking about how do you lean into your expertise around your instructional knowledge, your pedagogical content knowledge, your understanding of student engagement, to then be able to adapt your materials in meaningful ways. Because the thing is that it's very hard to differentiate before generative AI, because it would take you hours and hours and hours to make the amount of resources. But to be able to do that impactfully with AI literacy, meaning you know how to use the tools and evaluate the outcomes, it means that you're able to create really interesting content that you can then go test. Because I don't think it,
Man, it has paused on us. Yeah, the I wanted to take this from the angle when I started looked at this stat initially inside of our survey that I found extremely interesting was the creating teaching materials, and that's where Amanda is getting into there, is that idea of the level and the importance that we're able to have teachers be able to truly evaluate those materials when they're using it to create teacher materials. I think I see a lot of education, and I was a teacher, principal, district administrator as well. So that's been the bulk of my career. Is we know that there are times where unvetted materials certainly make it into our classroom. I'm sure that's never happened inside of your district, Charel, but in districts I worked in and schools I worked in, unvetted materials certainly made it into the classroom. And when those materials kind of sneak into our classrooms at times, and they're not high quality, and what our biggest thing that I would always push back on is not grade level, right? And so I do worry about this idea when we talk about utilizing it to create teacher materials. If we haven't done enough background teaching and knowledge of the adults and the actual users of it, right? The humans that are using it at the end, if they're not trained enough to be able to evaluate materials of, is this the grade level standard, that we're going to go back to that idea of using AI to create materials in a way that's not helpful, right? It's just going to be total hype if what we're doing is using AI to take a teaching material and I'm going to prompt the AI to make this material easier for my students, right? If you ask Gen AI to take a lesson plan that you currently have and make it easier for your students, it will do it, right? It has no qualms about doing it. And so I do think there's a piece of making sure that we're A, training our teachers, but making sure they're critical evaluators of curriculum that we place in front of our students. I'm interested in your chart, Chara. Do you see this at all? Do you have this? Or have you seen this problem sneak into your classrooms? You're in classrooms much more than I get to in my current role.
So yes, and I think that's an ongoing conversation. Talk about PLCs, talk about lesson planning, activity creation. I think because it is more obvious now, the existence of AI in current digital and cloud tools that are available on the hands of teachers and students, the conversation is getting bigger and it's getting louder. And so I think part of the training that needs to be provided to our educators is just like with students, critical thinking, right? Looking at what are the pros and cons, what's the impact of AI, and also all other aspects that doesn't only include, what happens in the classroom, but also the environmental impact of that, and
Yeah.
also, the economic impact. I have a lot of, colleagues and friends who were once in a different job position, but when AI came in, their role changed, right, within the company. So, in perspective of teaching and learning, we know very well that part of future jobs that are being created as we speak, and Amanda actually mentioned this, would be the inclusion of knowing how to navigate and knowing how to use AI, and also the prompt engineering piece, machine learning, and all of that.
hi,
Yeah, that
everybody. I got kicked off. Okay, this is what happens, everybody. I'm literally at a school district, and they only gave me 7 hours of access to the internet. So I just got kicked off the internet. So now I'm on my phone. So I'm gonna ask someone else to share my chart. AI is mad at me, so they kicked me off the internet. But I didn't mean to interrupt. But Jimmy, you were gonna say.
no, man, no, great. I'm glad. Yeah, pay for the extra hour next time, Amanda. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, no, we were just having a conversation. It's perfect time for you to hop back on because, sure, we were talking about making sure that we're prompting AI in a correct way. Is essentially
Yes.
making sure that we're not asking it to make the assignment easier, or making sure that we're really close evaluators. I know you have a lot of expertise in that, so really a perfect time for you to pop back on and really discuss that.
Absolutely. You know what, everybody? I love talking about generative AI, the most advanced technology, and like the internet says no. But I do think this is where it gets really interesting. There's research that shows that even if you have the best generative AI model in the world versus the one from 2 years ago, if you do not know prompting techniques, you will get bad answers on both. Literally, like it actually matters more how you learn to use the tools than the tools themselves. And if you're a really good prompter, then that's when it's going to matter to have a better tool because you're going to get more out of it. And so I think this is really what gets very interesting. And so prompting technique, like I said, that LinkedIn says AI literacy is a number one skill right now, like rising skill, is because these tools, when you build with technology, when you build with ChatGPT, when you ask questions, even though it just feels like you're just saying like, hey, build me this image, what you're actually doing is using technology, natural language to prompt technology. So it requires you to use special tool tips and strategies, but most importantly, you have to have the mindset of being able to have a conversation and to give a lot of detail. So Jimmy just actually put into the chat our prompt library. So when we ask a question of ChatGPT, we prompt it, and what you'll find is you could just cut and paste those into any chatbot, and what you're going to notice is the quality of the outcome will be much higher than you asking it a sentence. If you ask for a lesson plan on quadratic equations versus the way that we structure the lesson plan, where you give it context about the standard, who the audience is, the grade level, the length, any specific tools, it's going to be much better. So this is something that's there. But I also will say, someone mentioned in the chat that math, ChatGPT is not that good at math. So something to consider is that these systems, even when they are the best, are not going to be fully accurate. They're going to make mistakes all the time. So one of the most important mindsets of prompting is feedback, and it is evaluation. Can we evaluate the output and give feedback to make it better? Which is why it's so important to build those AI literacy skills. And someone's saying Notebook LM. We actually use Notebook LM today. It's a great one if you want to try. It's pretty good around actually giving you the ability to interact with documents or websites. It also lowers inaccuracies, which is pretty cool. So what we're going to do is, Jimmy, I think you're going to come back on share, right? And we're going to keep rolling.
Yep.
And this is amazing. Thank you guys for being flexible with me. This is always very funny when something goes wrong, but you guys are all awesome. So what we're going to do is we talked about those top skills. And now what we're going to do is we're going to have the hyper help. And this is what I think is really interesting. So where is it actually helping us? And I think the most important one is this question is, what benefits have you observed from using AI in your work? And the first one is going to be reduced time on administrative tasks. 70%. Wow, that's amazing. Personalized learning experience. And this is what's so interesting is that adults are getting personalized learning experiences, meaning like I have a new subject to teach or new curriculum, or I'm in my own master's program. We then have improved student engagement. Love to see that, meaning that teachers are using this to actually engage students. Improved classroom management, uh, other things, and then no benefits. You're going to see that people are really finding some strong benefits, and people are putting in the chat right now other ways in which your students are using it to provide feedback and others. But I think this is really interesting here because I think that this idea of saving time outside of the classroom or outside of when we have those meaningful discussions with the people within, whether we're in the district office or in a school, is really important. So Shara, what have you seen? If we can come off share, Shara, what have you seen be really the kind of biggest impact so far on your work, specifically you as an individual, but also what you see around you?
So as director, I use AI tools to actually for brainstorming ideas, like my thought
Mm.
part. So sometimes when you are trying to envision a professional development for educators or for administrators, you have big ideas. So AI comes into the picture because I throw in little prompts. I'm thinking of a 45-minute, 2-hour, 3-hour, kind of breakout session. This is the audience. This is the kind of data they're looking into, and this is the desired goal. So different ideas come up. And so that is helpful because for me, it makes my brain open up more in terms of, have I covered everything? Have I considered this? And I do like, the follow-up question at the bottom after I've given the prompt and AI generates the ideas
Mm.
or the text so to speak. And so I'm thinking, hey, I did not think of that question. Should I dive deeper into that, or should I not? Because that's just going to go further in the weeds and I'm going to get lost. And so I'm going to be, sidetracked with really the goal that I want to do. So for me, that's helpful. But also, I will tell you, even though that is helpful, it adds more work on my plate. And I don't know if Jimmy can relate to this kind of feeling. Like, man, how it was just a simple here or there. Here's the outline, then I can talk about it and I can run it. But now, because of the other suggestions, right, and other thoughts in the process, as I'm using AI, I can't help but, consider other ideas like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Now I have to create this in order to,
Yes.
to deliver that content.
Okay, so Sharo, so we're going to talk about hype versus help in a second, but you will notice on our website, we don't say anything about saving time because I almost feel like it just means you use your time differently because you get inspired by so much. So, okay, so Jimmy, before we go into the hype section, what do you think is helping? Like, so Jimmy's a little bit different, right? Jimmy's in, Carnegie Learning, but I'd love to know what you think is really helping you as an industry leader, because that's what you should be thinking about for your young people as much as even what's happening in schools.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, what a great perspective on that is too. And I completely agree. Like when I was, my daughter is now 10, when she was young, we used to always worry about, I know it still exists, but I've learned to not let her use YouTube, but like the YouTube vortex, right? Where it like leads you more and more and more and more and more. And you can get in an AI vortex, right? Like you absolutely can get into that same situation you're speaking of, Shar, where you're like, okay, I have to do a 1 hour meeting tomorrow. I wonder what some ideas, oh, I wonder what, oh, I wonder. And all of a sudden you're like 3 hours later and now you've got this huge conglomerate of 7,000 different tasks that you can do, right? Like, yes. And then now you've got to actually create the pieces that surround it. So I'm completely with you. I think what I use it for in my day-to-day work is, and as many teachers and building leaders are the same, we are, all of us in education have rather isolated jobs, right? I know
Mm,
you have a lot of 30 students in front of you, but you don't have a ton of time with your peers. You don't have the opportunity to say, I wonder what the teacher in the next classroom would think about this. And I am either on the road, on airplanes, or working from home as I am this afternoon. I'm by myself the majority of the time in my work environment, right? And so what I find it to be extremely helpful for is having that person to have a conversation with. And really, and Amanda, you have much more depth of knowledge than I do. Feel like it starts to get to know you more and more, and the more I conversate with it around what I believe and think about and what I need to be happening, whether it be with my team or with a district I'm working with, it is exceptional at just allowing me to have a peer coworker to throw an idea at it and see what it thinks, right? And says back to me, and then have that correspondence where otherwise in a work environment, whether it's in what I do now with Carnegie Learning or what I did when I was a teacher in the classroom, can be very lonely when it's, I got to
mm.
wait for fourth block before I can see the other science teachers and ask them what they think about that. I think that is extremely helpful for my profession. And I believe, again, I've not been in the classroom since we've had this level of AI, but what educators are doing in the building in the classrooms every day.
It's really interesting. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that's actually sharing your own thoughts here, because I think that this is why we love doing this work, is that we are all learning together. So you all have experiences. I do think that what's really interesting about the idea of like what Jimmy's talking about is if you're using ChatGPT, there's something called memory. And what it can do, you can actually go into the ChatGPT settings and actually look at the way it's actually like has memory about your conversations that you can either edit, remove. I think that my ChatGPT, based on how many things we do, thinks I'm probably insane. It probably thinks I just like to break eggs because we do an egg drop challenge rubric every time we're together. So it probably thinks I'm a weirdo. But I do think it's really interesting because, as you can see in the chat, there are a lot of different opportunities. But I do think that one of the things that gets really hard is that if you're overly optimistic or you're overly pessimistic, you're kind of removing the opportunity to have the deeper discussion. So, Shara, what do you think out of that list or even others is the most overhyped of what generative AI can do today?
I think the overhype is saying like Gen AI is like the silver bullet,
Mm,
and it gives you the perfect scenario, 100% accuracy, and back in the day would say, well, Google it, right? If you want to search for a topic or for content, just Google it, look it up. But now I hear a lot of conversations about, well, just put it in Chat GPT, or open your favorite AI tool, whatever that is, in order for you to get the answer. So it has to become what I call like a quick solution, a quick remedy, to the point where I think, we just have to be a bit more cautious, because as humans, as individuals, we have to keep on vetting any kind of content or any kind of information coming out from any Gen AI tool. Yes, it is helpful, but I think we have the capacity to really distinguish, what is true and accurate and correct. And we have also other tools that we need to utilize, including that human interaction, like what we have been mentioning here in our webinar, to make sure that we are having an equitable viewpoint in what we're gathering, whatever task that may be.
Absolutely. And yeah, everybody, the thing is, if anybody ever tells you that generative AI systems or applications have solved for inaccuracies or hallucinations, or for bias in outputs, no matter what it is, if it is generative AI, they are lying to you. I mean, this is the thing. These like machine learning and more traditional AI, there are measures in which you can say this is going to be more accurate. But the way that generative AI works is it's always making things up. It's actually a probability machine. It's actually just putting together parts of words based on how it's been trained and how you interact with it. And so at this stage, every single AI system, even the absolute best, will make mistakes and also not be able to accurately evaluate if they have made a mistake or not. One of my favorite things to do, if you want to try the overhyped thing, is ask it to give you an answer that's clearly wrong and then say, rate your response. And what happens a lot of times is ChatGPT or Claude will be like, nailed it, 10 out of 10, I'm right. And you're like, no, you're not. And be like, oh, I'm sorry. And then it will give you the same answer or an even worse one and be like 10 out of 10. Can I be 11 out of 10? It's very confident in its wrong answers. And this is why it's really interesting. I'll give you an example with math, because we do so much good work with Carnegie, is that if you use math, ChatGPT to help you give students explanations of math, I'm going to tell you right now, there are going to be inaccuracies all the time because ChatGPT is not doing math. And so we actually have not released a resource because of those inaccuracies. So I think you're definitely. But actually, I mean, I love ChatGPT. Is like, I had it rate an acrostic and it was so wrong. And it was like, nailed it. And I'm like, no, you didn't. It's like, yeah, I did. And I just think it's so funny because it doesn't have the ability to accurately evaluate even its own work. To something to consider. Jimmy, do you have any thoughts or anything that you think is overhyped?
Yeah, just in listening to you all speak in that conversation, I think it's so critical. I do think the overhype of like you're about a Gen AI model on its own without some level of machine-based learning qualities to it, where we've trained it on specific problems or we've trained it on subsets of tasks that we're asking students to do. To think that AI itself can become the tutor for students, right, is hype, right? I have not found that to be accurate for the reasons that you're saying. It's not going to be 100% accurate. It has a tendency, from what I found, to want the person to be correct, right? Like, it's pretty nice,
Yes.
right? Like, they're all super nice. Like, all of these chat engines want you to be right. They want to agree with you and they want to follow along. And that's great. I think humans need to be ultra nice to each other. So I'm really positive on being nice. But what we want in our math classrooms and our ELA classrooms is discourse, right? We want
Yes.
discourse and accurate discourse, or what an adult can do with a student to challenge their thinking on a problem or to scaffold them along to answer a problem. I have not seen Gen AI, be able to do that yet. Again, machine learning is different. When we train it on specific problems and mistakes that students or adults are likely to make, it is much better. But just to take a chat model, like a large language model that's available, whether free or the paid version, and think that that's able to replace one-to-one interaction or adult supervision of a tutor a student to proficiency, I think that is very much overhyped.
Yes, and I think that this is a little bit early. And so I will say that, like Eduardo, like at least right now, these tools are not pedagogical, and even if you try to fine tune them to make them more accurate, it tends to not work all the time. But what Jimmy's talking about when ChatGPT, like if you use something like Conmigo for math help, or you're asking for feedback, there's something called sycophancy, which is what happens is that the bots have been designed and trained not to give you a correct answer, but to give you an answer you like. So if you ever get the two, like you ask ChatGPT for an answer and it gives you two versions and you push one you like better, that's actually how AI is trained. It doesn't ask you which is more accurate, but it asks you which one you like better. And so that's part of it. But what's really funny about something like Conmigo is that if you're like, I don't know twice, sometimes Conmigo will just give you the answer because it feels bad for you, so to
Yeah.
speak. And so what happens is, and in fact, there are a lot of really interesting tools out there that will give you the answer first and then give you the explanation. And we know pedagogically, you don't start with the answer, you start with the process. And so
Hmm.
what we have here, you don't start with the outcome, you start with the process, and that's going to be really important. But I do think it's really interesting though, because we have been talking about this, and I think that there will be the idea of help to hype is interesting because these tools are going to get better. And so while generative AI may never be a perfect tutor, maybe the next version of generative AI plus machine learning or other technologies could be. And so I think that the more we can build generative AI literacy now to start understanding about evaluation, the better off we can be because the tools will get better. And I just want to say, I think this is a really interesting question, and we can go back and we'll have a couple more slides from the deck. But someone did bring up this idea of which skills are most important to teach first here. And I think that what's really interesting to me is that a lot of the skills that we see that are really necessary for good generative AI use are things like critical thinking, communication, feedback, evaluation, creativity, resilience, lifelong learning. So Shara's shaking your head. Those are things we have been trying to teach forever, right, Shara?
Right. That is absolutely correct. And I think, you know, the same way when you think of teaching, I know we have come up with so many jargons and trends in education, the science of teaching reading, the science of teaching mathematics, and so on and so forth. But we always go back to our pedagogical our pedagogy and our best practices as educators, right? And so the same thing with our students. Before a student can grasp anything, if a student doesn't have food on the table or is not being taken care of, that student will not be able to function fully and completely in the classroom. But I know that's a different topic, but I just wanted to share that, you know, so these are things that we have to be aware and to be cognizant all the time. So I don't want people to think in our webinar that, you know, just because you're using AI, we're just going to rely everything on that. That human touch, that human connection is very, very important. And AI is there, yes, that's great. And like what I said earlier, it's still growing. And I think down the road, 5 years, 10 years from now, you know, there's going to be a lot more things that we're not able to fathom at this moment and really define it, but it's going to happen. And we, you know, we will figure, oh, I didn't know that we're going to have a need for that. But look, AI has brought this up and here it is, right? And so
Absolutely.
I think it's more of the paradigm shift, that way of thinking. That is very important, and we should not lose that. So even when we're thinking of progress and development, right, we need to
Yes.
constantly be in touch with the human side of each and every one, because that is very important.
Absolutely. And I think that this is where we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to the slides. We're gonna do one more kind of key conversation, and then we're gonna have time for Q&A. So just know that like all the comments that you're doing, I think that there are some technical stuff in the chat that there are definitely some misconceptions. So I think I might do a little bit of that. But we can't actually see, yeah, there we go. And so here, this is actually what some people have actually brought up in the chat, which is really important, which is the idea of privacy regulations. And almost no 75% of those that responded are concerned about the privacy issues related to AI in education. And so what we would suggest very strongly, like I mean, we worked with 3 districts just today, my organization on AI guidance. So I do think this is very like positive to see how many people recognize that these systems require human data to be able to work. And so they are trained on human data like the internet or images or stock photos, but they are also going to take our data and how we interact with them. So I'm actually going to go to Sharo. Like, how are you creating spaces in which you can feel more confident? Not only, I'm going to go a little bit broader, so privacy concerns, but also just safety online with generative AI.
So it cannot be helped in any humongous or large organization or large public school district like myself. We're always going to be susceptible to, potential threats, right? Especially when it comes to online. And so we do have a big component or in a department or a team, a small team, not that big, but they do play a very significant role, and that is our cybersecurity team. And of course, we have to ensure that we do have infrastructure in place for safety on student data, but not only for students, but also for our staff and our educators. And yes, there is an ongoing, I would say debate, which is not going to stop. You need to allow this, or how come this is not allowed, and these other tools are allowed. So I think that is the kind of reality that we're going to live in as we continue to immerse in different types of emerging technologies and the existing technologies that we have and we deal with every day. And also, we understand that the community at large, there's always going to be a lot of threats. The more society, immerses itself in anything digital, in anything cloud-based, that's going to be part of the whole package. You need to have cybersecurity in place. You need to have the infrastructure in place. And so, and that's important. And I know that for teachers, we teach our students about how to be a proper digital citizen, right? So again, all of these things kind of come together, and like what I said, that's just a reality that we have to live in, and we need still to ensure that we protect the privacy and identity of every individual in a district.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go to Jimmy. So have you anything to add or anything you think about as those building ed tech tools with AI?
No, I mean, I think it's important to know, and I'll kind of ask back to you, Amanda, and your experience in the policy guidance you're working on. I mean, I think in the ed tech community, we've been as uber focused on student privacy data for the last 20 years, and as we are now, right? I think incredibly cautious. I think just as much as school systems are as well. Like, we all share in that absolute understanding that we have to ultimately protect the safety of our students at all times. That includes in your school building, and it also includes their digital privacy as well. My question would be in terms of how that's shifted from over the last 2 to 3 years as Gen AI has become the concern. Have you found, Amanda, when you work with policy guidance and writing these documents to support schools or district, is there tons of extra layers of security wording that need to be put in because of Gen AI, or how has it changed? How has it shifted?
We would suggest, I just want to kind of piggyback on two things. One is that we do believe that there should be very specific policies around data privacy and security. I do think that we have to recognize that instead of like most technologies, generative AI is really the fuel of generative AI is your data. And so, for example, ChatGPT is default going to train on your data. And in fact, we showed people today how to turn it off. And it's not even saying turn off data training. It says, do you not want to help other people with this? Like it's like written in a way that you would never know it was about data privacy and training. And so, what we think though is that part of what we do is talk about mindsets of even understanding how easy it is to give up all of your data without realizing it. For example, Notebook 11, people are talking about Mandy on our team's husband put 30 years of his personal journals into Notebook LM without realizing that he had given up all of their personal data. Or I've been in rooms in which counselors have been writing reference letters using students' real names, resumes, and addresses, because the actual reference letter could be better because of that information in terms of what is going to be more specific. But at that point, she was out of compliance, both FERPA and COPA. And so I think that what we have to do is it can't just be the guidance and policy, as Shara was saying, and Jimmy, but it also has to be about mindsets of use and recognizing like that students, first of all, if you're using a system that's an open system, that's not an enterprise system with a DPA, you're going to be most likely in a generative system. It's going to be using that data to train the system, meaning that that data goes into the database. It's going to train that going forward. And so this is where it gets really tricky because we don't think of it the same way, because it's going to be something that doesn't just sit in a database or on the cloud, but actually is used to improve the systems. So there's an axiom, everybody, that if it is free, you are the product. So if you're using a system online like Instagram or TikTok or ChatGPT, you have to realize that if it's free, it's because they're getting value out of you. And in the case of generative AI systems, it's not just usage. It is also that you're actually giving them data to train their systems going forward. So we just think that there's a combination of both guidance and policy writing, as well as really AI literacy work around actually upping our understanding of what's really happening with these systems.
And
So why
Amanda,
don't we, yeah,
yeah,
go ahead,
I just
Sarah.
want
Yes,
to add
please.
too, I think it's also important as an individual user is awareness. You
Yes.
know, if you mentioned about free, and that's always very attractive. As a, you know, when I was a classroom teacher, anything free, I grab it, right? But now, since it's so easy to send off free subscriptions or free memberships, especially with digital products, just be aware, you know, and there are times you have to read the fine line and be cognizant of that. And, you know, if you're willing to take the risk, just make sure as well that you have some best practices in place and some strategy. Should something happen, you know what to do, right? Because again, now the game is your own data, your own information being available out there.
Absolutely. And this is where I think there's some really great policies out there. So we will have time for one more. Let's go one more slide, and then we're going to go to questions. So AI policies, this is where a really nice caveat, because we actually do have a lot of questions around policies. I will say on our website, we have some great policy documents as well. But in 2024, there was only 20% of the respondents had some sort of AI policy, and now it's 40%. I would say this is probably in our mind a little bit high. It's a little bit high for what we see, but it is great to see the doubling of the amount of people. So I think that this is where there's a real opportunity. And maybe let's just go to the next slide just to see if we can get one more in. Okay, last thing is what I think a lot of the questions in the chat have been. So this is going to be our transition into the Q&A, is that AI, what we think about in schools is that it is for cheating, that AI is for cheating. And so what we see here is that there are essentially, you would say more than, around 80% are worried about or very worried about cheating. And then mostly unworried is still kind of negative. And what we're going to see though is that is some shifting down in terms of where we have, but I do think that this continues to be the strongest rhetoric about the risks of AI for students. And so Sharo, how do you all think? Have you seen a rise in cheating in El Paso? Like, what do you think is happening?
So this is a constant worry, the cheating aspect of, when it comes with students. I think there is, that concern. And also there has been an increase with regard to students utilizing AI tools. But also maybe I would just like kind of respond to this by looking at the question of, if we are the way we provide assessments, right? The way we assess our students and they're able to grab answers, using an AI tool. So maybe, just maybe, think about how can we better assess mastery of
Mm,
students when it comes to learning. So should we kind of, find a balance? Maybe where you have your multiple choice assessments and everything has, it's easy to grade and you can, there's already a quantifying factor after the student, completes that assessment. Or would you provide opportunities for kids to showcase their mastery through projects, through collaboration, something that will really navigate more on their critical thinking so that they can show that
mm.
they can demonstrate it as well as their creativity.
Absolutely. So why don't we come off share because we're coming to the end of our time together. But I do think what's really interesting here is that one of the only changes we have made in the entire 2 years that AI for Education has been around is we no longer really talk about AI policy writing. We talk about more AI guidance writing. One of the reasons for the question that we have here is that even with cheating, this idea that students have cheated. By the way, like I don't know if you guys know, but kids cheat and they cheated before AI and they're going to cheat whatever the next thing is. In fact, 60 to 70% of high schoolers show some cheating behavior every year. It has, I will say that they've seen research has shown from Stanford that their kids are not cheating more, they're just cheating differently. So they're cheating with AI and generative AI instead of their parents helping, a friend, crib notes, an essay writer, Wikipedia. And so I do think that when we talk about guidance, so to go to the questions that we have, first of all, if you want help writing a set of guidance or policy, our website has a ton of downloadable resources on that literally have examples of policy you can take or even a workshop framework. And so know that we have free resources. But what we do find is that if you can have better discussions like we did today, we had students, leaders, teachers in the room, kids and teachers were talking about academic integrity the same way. They were talking about it in a way that they know it's important, but it's very hard right now to feel confident that that they're not going to be kids are not going to be accused of AI cheating when they didn't, because AI detectors can be inaccurate, or that teachers did not go into teaching to be AI detectors or even cheating detectors. I don't know if anybody went into teaching was like, you know what, I want to catch kids cheating. It is not very good, right? Like it's not. And so we do think that there's an opportunity here to start rethinking the way that we assess. And I know that's work that Carnegie is doing as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask one question to like we're going to end with one of the questions from the audience. And so there are questions about different AI tools that could be helpful. So we talked a lot about ChatGPT or Notebook LM, but do you guys have a favorite tool that you like to use? Mine is Claude. I will say my favorite's Claude, which is
Same
another
here.
chatbot.
Same.
Charo?
Claude is called also one of my go-tos as a standalone, AI tool. There are times that I would compare because I love to do comparative work. So I'll type it in Claude, and then I'll type it in Gemini, then I'll type it in Microsoft Copilot, and then also there's another one I can't remember right now, but yeah, and then I compare, and then I think, and then you process, right? And
Yeah.
so how can you come up with the best, I guess, response to what you're looking for?
Absolutely. And I love how everyone, you guys have been so amazing in the chat. Like I love how everyone's like, we have them too. So check out what your colleagues say. But Jimmy, do you have a favorite? Do you have your buddy?
Well, my buddy is ChatGPT, and I will say, like at Carnegie, we largely use Gemini, and I have just ChatGPT and I have become so close, and he she they knows what I'm thinking, and so they know what I want, and we really just have a good working relationship. So it'd be like if all of a sudden you gave me a new office mate. So I'm trying to embrace, but I will be full transparency, and Barry, our CEO, is likely on. So I'm trying, Barry. I understand that we have a good relationship with ChatGPT right now. Um,
Absolutely. I
yeah,
love
there's
it. I
new
mean,
things in the
yeah.
in the chat box, Amanda, that I don't know.
I
You
know
probably heard
Goblin
of.
Tools. I know all of
I'm
these
like, I
guys,
don't know
but
what that is. That's
Goblin
awesome.
Tools is one where you can have it like read your email to see how snarky it is and then make it spicier or less spicy. It's kind of funny. They have teacher tools. I think that the most important thing, this is like a nice way to wrap because like when we do our trainings, and if you want to work, we would love to work with you all if you're thinking about it. But when we do our trainings, we always focus on the foundation model. So we actually focus on ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, and others, ones that are open and free, Canva. And so the reason why we do that is because you learn a lot about if you learn how to prompt well on one. So Jimmy, if you absolutely love ChatGPT, then that's your buddy. Stick with it because good prompting in ChatGPT can be lifted and shifted to any model. And so what we love to see here though is honestly though, everybody is that whatever you like to do, whatever is your favorite, just continue to build your capacity. Don't feel like the inundation of tools is something you have to follow. If you have something that works for you, then do that. Use your expertise, learn about prompting, build your AI literacy, build it around you as well, because it's not just for you, it's for your staff and your community, for your students, for even families that work with you. That's a real opportunity. So what we have as a wrap up, first of all, thank you guys so much for hanging out. I want to say thank you to Sharo and Jimmy for being their amazing selves. I cannot tell you how much I enjoy them. And also here's the bell. It's time for me to go. But then also just know that if you want extra support, we've got free resources. We do, we do PD, we do all kinds of great stuff with Carnegie Learning. But just keep being your amazing selves, okay? Just keep trying, sharing, and doing your best, because that's the best thing we could do today. Like, is just talk about it, find opportunities to share, and start building our AI literacy. So thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Shara. Thank you for the entire Carnegie team. You all have been amazing. And thanks for dealing with me now being in portrait mode.
It's all good. We love it. We love
You
it.
see how long my hair is, everybody. This is like the view of like how long Amanda hair is. But thank you, everybody. Thanks everyone for being a part. We'll have a recording that's shared, and just really appreciate you all for being here today.
Thank you, everybody.